Welcome to Canadian Agriculture Unpacked. I'm your host, Bob Friesen. With me today, back again, co-host Wayne Easter and Jack Wilkinson. Wayne is a longtime 28-year veteran of the House of Commons, former Solicitor General of Canada, longtime chair of the Finance Committee. Jack Wilkinson is the former president of the Canadian Federation of Agriculture, Ontario Federation of Agriculture, and the International Federation of Agriculture Producers. Both of these gentlemen have more than paid the rent for the space that they occupy on this planet. Our special guest today is Greg Donald, Executive Director of the Prince Edward Island Potato Board. Welcome here, Greg.
Good morning. It's my pleasure.
So, Wayne and Jack, you have any smart-ass comments you want to make before we start? Or other than that I need a haircut and you guys obviously don't?
No, we're
No,
good.
it's just it's really good to see the one of the representatives from the key driver of the Prince Edward Island economy in Prince Edward Island with us today, because I think that's critically important in these times. Not very often you get one commodity that is so important to a provincial economy as the potatoes are to this one.
Well said, Wayne. Greg, I got to settle one thing, though. I have a 14-year-old that goes to a French school here in Quebec. He tells me that potatoes are actually a fruit because they're an apple, because in Quebec they're called pomme de terre. Can we settle that today? Is it a fruit or is it a vegetable?
Well, it's definitely a vegetable, and apples are grown above ground. You can tell them, and potatoes are grown below ground.
So if the Quebec's provincial government legislates that we have to call them a fruit, you're not going to call them a fruit.
Definitely not. Yeah, no.
Anyway, Greg, welcome again to the show. Give us a little bit of an overview of your industry on the island, Greg.
Certainly, and again, thank you very much for this opportunity, and particularly amongst distinguished gentlemen like yourselves that have played important roles in the agriculture industry in Canada and beyond. And so the potato industry, and as Wayne knows firsthand, it's an old, I'll say, industry here on PEI. Potatoes have been grown on PEI for over a couple hundred years, and they've been an important crop from day one. And they some of our early settlers that came to PEI from northwestern Europe, predominantly after the potato famine. That's why potatoes were grown here in PEI, and because of the back then and still today, because of the conditions here, we have perfect soil and weather that it's continued to be an important crop for many years. And so we have somebody that works right here at the potato board, that her son will be, and she said she's going to have a hard time keeping him in school because he loves working on the farm so much. He'll be the ninth generation farmer on their farm, on their potato farm. And so that's pretty amazing. So it's a lot of years, a lot of experience, a lot of great people and conditions. And so the industry here contributes, farm cash receipts are over 400 million, and to the economy here, that's close to $2 billion, direct, indirect impact. So as Wayne said, it's an important crop here, and it's the largest portion. Agriculture is the number one industry, and potatoes is the most significant part of that. So we're it's been here for a long time, and it's an important part, and I think it has a bright future as well.
Just, I guess the both Greg and I were at a meeting yesterday where we were talking about agriculture exports, and I guess Greg had, there's the frozen product, the processed product, the seed industry, and the table stock industry. I guess I'd ask you, how important is that export industry to the province? I mean, we're only 180,000 people here, so certainly
Yeah.
they can't grow all our. You know, we are. I don't know if we still are or not, but we were for the longest time the biggest potato producer in Canada. So how important is that to export, and where do we stand in the stacking list of uh, potatoes produced in the country now?
Yeah, it's look, it's huge, Wayne. We are the largest fresh, or we often say the table for the table market, table producing for that sector in Canada. We produce the most acres of potatoes in Canada, and maybe to give a back up a little bit, about 60% of our and maybe I'll back up even more to your comment about the number of people at PEI who said yesterday too, which is interesting. We produce roughly about 2.5 billion pounds of potatoes a year here. So to put that in perspective, each of us, some of us maybe more than ever, others, but we eat about 100 pounds of potatoes, either fresh or frozen, each of us a year. And so you can do the math on 2.5 billion pounds of potatoes. We produce the annual needs of about 25 million people. So from a province of 180,000, and so the importance of export. It's it's off of PEI. It's everything, you know. So to put it in perspective, but of our production, that production, about 60% is processed, mostly right here on PEI, and about 30% fresh, which is Canada number one, U.S. number two, and to about 20 other countries. So export beyond Canada, U.S. is pretty important to us. Places like the Caribbean, Puerto Rico, of course, part of U.S., but that's a significant market of ours, and the other 10% of our production would be seed production. So we we have a relatively diversified market, if you will, and to each of those sectors, but a heavy, you know, one of our most important customers outside of Canada would be the U.S. But with, you know, we want to maintain and grow that business, but with you know, all the usual, I'll say, uncertainties, and and then in particular the uncertainties around tariffs, you know, more than ever, exploring new trade, like new export markets, is a priority for us right now. Has been and definitely is now. Yeah.
25 million, that's a lot of people. Talk about farmers feeding the world.
Yeah, just
Yes.
maybe
Yeah.
you could
Yeah.
kind of give us a sense of what potential for growth still exists in PEI. Over the last number of years, you've seen a lot of expansion for processing in Alberta and Manitoba. Is there still room for expansion with the acreage available in PEI for potatoes, or are you kind of capping out as far as your rotation and the number of acres available?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that question, Jack. Uh, I know, as we've seen the last number of years, expansion in Western Canada, and some folks will say, "Geez, PEI, you're losing your place or whatever." But we look at that as a very positive thing,
Yeah.
because we're in a market, because we are, Jack, at our capacity in terms of acreage, and so it's a good thing that that expansion is happening, because it's a good indication that the market we're in is growing. So sooner any day being a competing in a market that's or supplying a market that's growing than one that's flat or decreasing. So that's a good thing. So, and another point I'd like to make. So because of you know, there's been a tremendous focus. There always has been, but more so in the last 10 to 15 years on improving. Because we can't expand here, we've used the kind of the theme or motto: if we can't get bigger, we have to get better. So our focus is continually on how do we improve soil health. You know, how do we get new varieties? How do we how do we deal with the crazy weather? We had a disaster here last summer, our crop because of dry weather. Like, how do we deal with that? So our so yes, there has been, although it is mostly driven in the processing sector in North America uh, and beyond. But up until the last year, there's about 4% in the North American processed French fry market, and that's equivalent to about one French fry plant. So, but in
Wow.
the last year, that's flattened out. So we can't expand acreage here, and there's still opportunities to expand in Western Canada.
It's an
So
interesting
you,
sidebar, Bob, just before we leave the topic here. I farm in Northern Ontario, and people think it's kind of extremely north. It's still south of the 49th parallel, slightly in the New Liskeard area. And over the
Hmm.
last few years, two very significant potato producers have moved into the area from Southern Ontario, from the Bradburn Marsh, and they're
Hmm.
growing their acreage quite substantially. We're not anywhere near a processing plant size. It's still all going out packed, but our climate probably is going to be a growing area because we're around 2,400 heat units. They're getting great yields because the soil hasn't had any
Hmm.
disease problems. They got lots of room to rotate, and they're actually, got fresh black muck soil, and so it's just interesting. 30 years ago when we moved up here, you would have never thought there would have been any
Hmm.
vegetable growing in northern Ontario, and they're in carrots and onions. We even got pivots up here for irrigation for onions from seed. So some of this stuff that really is amazing how much the agriculture industry is changing and adapting to both the climate, the cost of land, and other things.
That's a great example, and again, here on PEI, we've seen an increase in corn production, and that is exclusive solely because of new varieties that can
Yeah.
mature in our very limited growing season. And another really good news story here in PEI, and I know you guys are all familiar with the variety Russet Burbank, and globally, it's probably the number one variety worldwide, and it's really sought after. It was the number one variety with McDonald's, and it used to be, and Wayne helped me out, probably 60-70% of our acreage on PEI was Russet Burbank. It was the number one variety by far. It still is in many other provinces and states. It's not anymore. It's less than 10% of our acreage here on PEI. The good news story is a variety called Mountain Gem is by far the number one variety. And the reason why, there's a few reasons why. It takes about 30% less nitrogen. So that's a good news story. It's cheaper to grow, less residual nitrogen with our uncertain weather, with it when it's dry and that sort of thing. It also matures 2 weeks earlier than Russet Burbank. So in our limited window here,
Yeah.
if you can't, a seed won't germinate here most years, although it's getting later after October 15th. So if we can, Russet Burbank, you need to push it to the end of the season, and there's no time to establish a cover crop after you harvest that Russet Burbank. With Mountain Gem, that 2 weeks, you can overseed the field with seeds that'll germinate before October 15th and and consume any residual nitrogen and also protect the ground and have healthier soils. And and the other thing is it yields about 30% better than Russet Burbank.
Wow.
So it's a great news story, and our processing customer, it makes excellent product. So they're happy with it, and that came about it and a number of other varieties here. There's been a shift through taking varieties from all over the world, planting them across the island in large scale variety trials, and some winners evolved. So it's kind of neat. There's things continue to evolve, and varieties, obviously are a key important part of that. New varieties.
Greg, you spoke about exports and imports. Are potatoes in CUSMA? Are you
They
in
are.
the? They are.
Yep, they are.
So
Yep.
you know,
So we've been fortunately, there hasn't been any negative impacts from tariffs because of that.
Do the Americans have some kind of an issue with potatoes at the moment? I heard
They
that,
have too many of them.
oh, they have too many.
That's the unless I'm missing something, Bob. There's a huge crop of potatoes in Idaho this past year, and so there's an oversupply situation.
What sets the price of potatoes?
Certainly the market, and but I say that because again, and I've been at the potato board here. I've been in the industry. Gee whiz, probably too long. Some would think, but I don't I don't think so. But it's in the last 15 years, we've seen, just to mention a few things, an evolution of specialty potatoes and that are different and are premium, like the creamers. And so there's products that have been able to demand a premium because of differentiation in the market. I'll say for the mainstream potatoes, I'd like to think that we can get a little bit of a premium because of our, we're able to provide a consistent supply of quality product. But having said all that, it's economics 101 in a lot of cases. It's supply and demand. So like I said, a year like this where there's overproduction in the Columbia Basin, in Idaho, Alberta, that has a negative, obviously creates an oversupply and puts downward pressure on price. So we're seeing. So I know there's lots of talk about increasing retail prices. They may be higher, but they're not higher for our farmers this year.
Wayne, did you have something?
No, no, that covers it. This has been a tough year here economically for the primary producer because we've had I guess the worst drought I think we've ever had, and so production was off. In some cases, as much as 50%, if you can believe that. I've talked to farmers that have had a 50% decline in normal production. The ones with irrigation had reasonable production. So very hard for farmers to fulfill their contracts on the processing side for many of them as well. So weather plays a big factor as well. So the pressure is going to be on now for more deep water wells for irrigation. I'm sure you want to be able to have the backup so that you can, in a bad year, in a drought year, that you can maintain that production level.
Oh, I was just going to reflect on that. It was, I can't think of a better word or worse word to describe it as. It was a disaster last year, and it was, again, it was worse than 2001. Was another bad year here in terms of heat and rainfall. But this past summer, it was dry, it was hot, like record temperatures and a lot of wind, and it costs, like, for processing and fresh potatoes, it's well over $5,000 an acre to grow an acre of potatoes. So if you have 500 acres in the ground, you can do the math. Let's round it up to, you got $3 million in the ground. So if you dig 30% less, that's a pretty big hit in one season. So the risks are yeah, they're not getting any lighter or less, and so we only have about 10% of our acreage irrigated. And in fact, like you said, Wayne, in fact, with all the sunshine, they actually did better than average, the irrigated, because they had heat, sunshine, and water, and so they did really well. So and we, as you said, we tend to refer to it as supplemental irrigation. There's years here where we have too much rain and they don't turn them on. Other years where, like last summer, you could turn it on, leave it on all summer. So there's a big big greater interest in irrigation for sure, supplemental irrigation right now.
How are you getting along with the processors?
Good. I say that. Look, we have, and I'm not just saying that. We have a really good relationship with our local processor here. Sometimes we have challenges and whatnot, but they've been a great partner.
Are they still looking for the perfect 3-inch French fry?
They're always looking for the for the perfect fry, and but sort of along the lines of what we were saying there, I know uh, uh, with that side of the business, it is about consistent supply, a good quality product, and um, we're we have growers here that can do that and do it consistently, but we get a year like last year that becomes a big problem. But yeah, used to be they wanted, Bob, really long fries, and it's interestingly enough, the specs have changed. The long ones break, so they so the size profile has actually changed. I can in my time, a lot of the parameters have changed. So and it differs between retail and uh, and then business for the quick service for the fast food chains is different too. So, but
I recall we had a CFA meeting in PEI one time, and we toured a French fry factory. And afterwards, we all gathered in one room, and the manager told us we could ask whatever question we wanted. So I
mhm,
talked to him about the perfect 3-inch French fry. I said, you got to admit that as a processor, you want a 3-inch French fry because it's a competitive issue. I said, have you ever done consumer research and asked the consumer whether they give a rat's ass whether it's 2 inches or 1.5 inches or 3 inches?
yeah,
And he did admit, no, you're right, they have not. But
yeah.
Jack, I'm glad to see you have the IFAP banner behind you. And I know you did a lot of work with developing countries. Did you run into any countries with where potato production was important and a priority?
Well, I mean, McCain's and Irving both, but I think McCain's in particular has done a lot of international activity, both on processing as well as growing. So I think there's great potential in some countries for that expansion for sure. But I mean, I think the water problem is really going to be the interesting future question as to with some of the climate changes, what countries are going to be able to handle this kind of production with the need for water. Because I really get nervous, and I know it's been going on for a long time, but anytime we start sinking in deep wells, for irrigating, the majority of our crops, you really start to worry about the aquifer. So I'm really pleased to hear that research is being done on varieties that use less water, are
Hmm.
fixing more nitrogen, shorter growing season. I mean, this is going to be the big question mark, I think, as time goes on. Just where are some of these suitable areas going to be for high water crops? Are we going to be able to keep the production where the processing plants are, and what's going to happen worldwide on some of this stuff for sure?
Yeah. So Jack, I'm current vice president of the World Potato Congress, and so we host a congress every 2 years. Last year was in Adelaide. This fall it's in Navasha. It's in Kenya, and so we and have been in numerous other places. And what with potatoes, because of the global water potatoes situation, water potatoes are very well positioned because the amount of food nutrition that can be achieved per unit of area of land is greater with the least amount of water for potatoes using potatoes versus wheat, corn, or rice, or the other major global crops. So it's actually increasing in importance globally, and we see that in a lot of the developing countries. There's much greater interest in potatoes, and on the water issue here, we're I know, and I say we, I mean the public on PEI are extremely conscientious about our water supply, and I can say with a lot of confidence, our most of our folks in the Department of Environment have mapped out every watershed on PEI, and they know the capacity of every watershed. So they're only issuing. It's all regulated and permitted. They know the capacity, so they're making sure that only the right number of permits are issued for each watershed that don't exceed the capacity of the of the of our aquifers to recharge. Probably a bigger challenge is going to be how to manage that capacity amongst the users. Yeah, and I mean agricultural users, because I have no doubt that we'll continue to look at better ways and new varieties, and but irrigation, supplemental irrigation in our case, is going to be critical to long term to farming on PEI.
Just a question, Greg. You might know the answer. In terms, I'm hearing a fair bit of criticism, and I've talked to the minister about it. The closing a research stations across the country. In my own view, and this is what I told Heath, that's Ottawa looking after itself. So we don't want to cut jobs in Ottawa. So the research stations are spread across the country. Then cut some of them. And I know the argument made to the minister was, well, there's a lot of redundancy in terms of trials. Fact of the matter is, we're a big country. A crop doesn't grow the same in Prince Edward Island soils or Nova Scotia soils as it does in Alberta soils. So you need some of that duplication, I guess would be the proper word. Anyway, is there any impact on the, I know Irving's have a research farm up here now as well, but is there any impact on potato research as a result of these closures?
I absolutely believe there is. Yes, Wayne. And I don't know if Wayne knows. You gentlemen may know Dr. Robert Coffin, and you hit the nail on the head, Wayne. Robert, if I heard him say it once, I heard him say it a million times. He said, "Greg, you have to have good, credible local research for all the reasons you just said, Wayne, and also that's important, but." I'm going to say, like Nepan, the importance of the beef industry, forages. I understand that station is one of that's critical to. We know in PEI over the long term that, and we're very fortunate. Our research agronomist and science that we have on our team, Ryan Barrett. He has a dairy background, and the importance of we get stuck in our silo and with potatoes, but I think it's critical for a long-term success that we have a good, diverse, integrated agriculture. We need livestock, we need field crops, we need manure from the livestock. Like you gentlemen know all those pieces, and Nepan is an important part. Just as important as potato variety trials, in Charlottetown, let's say. So I think that's definitely a direct impact. And I personally, I think the challenge they have is is a lot of the facilities are old and they've gotten expensive to operate. So to me, they need to address the operational, the cost of running a research station, and rather than just cutting them. And last thing I'll say is I don't know what the numbers is, but I don't know why I have $7 or $8. Every dollar in research will pay back $7 or $8. Maybe you guys know, maybe it's more than that, but an investment in this research is going to be a payback. So cutting it, we're gonna lose by cutting out those institutions, in my
I
opinion.
find that
And
really interesting. I mean, I don't know when people will learn that primary research is absolutely critical to agriculture as
yeah,
well as a host of other things. The last thing we want is everything to move to proprietary research owned by the companies as well,
thank you. Yeah,
because
yeah,
that's a risk. So,
yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
getting that balance right is critically important. You got to have enough public research so there's some independence in the system, there's some feedback, there's some challenging. And I think commodity groups in Canada have done an excellent job, generally speaking, of keeping that a key priority. That if we don't have research coming out in every crop we're growing, we're at the beginning of the end as far as being competitive.
Hmm.
And why people in ivory towers just don't understand that is absolutely beyond me, because it's proven over and over again. And all you have to do is look around the world, where if you don't have local research going on, you don't have good agriculture taking place, and they soon become uncompetitive.
Well, you're absolutely right. It's that proprietary versus public research, right? And I mean, those
Mm.
armchair quarterbacks in this, well, I can't say Sir John Carling building anymore because Wayne Easter blew that up. But
Hmm.
they would not, they wouldn't recognize that, right?
No.
They would not recognize the important difference between the two. That's part of the problem. Greg, tell me something. Now that I make all the food around the household here, what's the best potato to use in the kitchen?
Number one, it has to be a PEI potato.
Of course. Good.
And look, depends, Bob. Depends what you're preparing. If you're making fresh cut fries, for example, I mentioned the Netagem, a variety or a good. It's a russet variety, so a russet variety. Also a good dual purpose. They are a good baker. They have good texture and that sort of thing. If you like a little moister potato and a little bit of color, then which are increasing in importance across North America, is a yellow flesh variety. There's a variety grown here, for example, called Satina, and and you know what? And that's a still an opportunity. You mentioned apples at the start, and apple there's challenges around it with potatoes, but they've done a tremendous job of marketing their products by variety, and 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 that's still a big opportunity in the potato category.
Yeah,
So
interesting.
as opposed to type, like we tend to sell by a russet or a white fleshed or yellow or red, by or by use, like a baker or fryer, or that sort of thing. So but you can't go wrong if it's a PEI potato.
There you go. I'll keep that in mind. Uh, I know PI produces a lot of potatoes. I used to farm in Manitoba. We had a lot of potato production around the Cypress River area in Manitoba. And I know
Hmm.
Alberta is quite big on potato production too. And when I was still
Hmm.
involved in the Canada-Mexico partnership meetings, Alberta did a fair bit of industry bilateral work with the Mexicans. Are
Hmm.
you aware of that, or what's going on between Canada and Mexico in potato production?
Um, it's I'll put it this way: it's definitely a market of interest, um, and um, there's interest in Mexico as well. And but at the current time, we don't have access, and we do to a short distance. I believe it's in the northern part of Mexico, and which just doesn't make it feasible to serve that small area of the market because for us, we export potatoes. For example, I mentioned to Puerto Rico. They leave Halifax, hit Florida, and then end up in Puerto Rico. And we can just as easily export potatoes in containers right around into the Gulf, and so by water. So that's an interest, for not just for us, for Canada, and it's an interest for Mexico, but we don't have access yet. But the U.S. It is currently they worked many years. I'm going to say over 20 years to have access to Mexico, and I don't know the exact dates, but I will say in the last 5 years they've gained access, and it's the U.S.'s number one export market is Mexico,
Is
and
that
it's
because Mexico is trying to build their own industry, or why are there access issues?
it's probably trade related. I think the U.S. gets Mexico sells. Oh dear, Wayne, help me there. It was mentioned yesterday. A
Yeah, I,
product, I'll
yeah,
say, to the
I,
U.S. Another a fruit. Uh,
yeah, I forget it
yeah,
too.
and I'm going to say limes, but it's not. But yeah, I can't think of it, Bob. But to the U.S. So in
Avocado? Are
turn,
you talking avocado?
avocado. Thank you, thank you.
Avocado,
Yes, sir.
avocado. That's
That's
what it was.
exactly
Yeah,
what it is. Yeah, I'm sorry,
avocado.
I was
Sorry,
Yeah.
way
I'm,
off.
I'm half Mexican. These guys know that.
There you go. So that was my bad. I made that mistake. And in turn, it that's my understanding is potatoes, but they only sell russet potatoes to Mexico. Mexico grows a lot of potatoes themselves, but I believe it's a climate and whatnot. They don't grow russets, so that's what the U.S. Ships there. So we don't currently, but we're hopeful that'll be an opportunity as well for us. And I believe Alberta, the West, shipped many years ago shipped seed potatoes into Mexico.
Oh, that's
Um,
what it was.
yeah, yeah, and I think for I've heard of a number of reasons, and it might be phytosanitary or logistical. There's reasons that it just years ago. So yeah, so that's where that stands. And 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 I think all of our countries or the three countries in the trade agreement are because of the uncertainties are looking for how they can how we can get have more certainty. So that's of interest for us for sure.
Jack.
Bob, there was a week ago right now actually, a
Mm.
potato expo in Charlottetown, and this question would go to Greg. The cost in the industry now to produce is really getting out of hand. But and the way that farmers are trying to gain efficiencies is quite unreal as well. Like there's there was drones there that can spray. There's the possibility of target spraying in terms of just where the problem is in the industry. There's packers that use packer wheels that use technology on them that Craig McCluskey manufactures actually that just puts a squirt of fertilizer here where it's needed and a squirt of fertilizer. I mean, some of the innovation that's taking place in the industry is unreal, but the cost is also unreal.
It's really taken off in the last 5 to 10 years. There's always been new ways of doing things, new technology, but it's unbelievable. And with AI, I don't think you mentioned AI, and you know it's unbelievable, and it's driven by like you said the high cost and the risks and things and labor. That's along with trade, weather, and costs and labor would be right at the top of the list. So a lot of the new technologies, you mentioned drones. One of my first jobs as an agronomist with McCain Foods in New Brunswick many years ago was crop scouting, and I probably walked about 1,500 acres a week, measuring for bugs and Colorado potato beetle and flea beetles and whatever else, so we could decide as part of integrated pest management, what to do. My son can worked on a project last summer with a company out of Israel where he could scout the same number of acres I did in a week in a day or two, and by flying a little drone, and it did the same thing I did. All the information was compiled by AI. A one-page report, like on a field, would be uh, reviewed by an agronomist, and then the farmer would have a pest status, in his field. And so yeah, the technologies are amazing. It's moving quick, and but I'll put this plug in. Um, I our regulatory system in Canada isn't keeping up with the technology. So drone technology, using drones to apply crop protectants, has been available for a few years in the U.S., and we still can't do it here in Canada, for example.
Well,
So
hopefully once Ukraine is done with their war, Wayne, there'll be a couple of drones left over for you to use on your potato project.
there you
Potato
go.
project.
Yeah.
Jack.
Jack.
Well, with where we are right now, I mean, one could be a little bit concerned about where future trade goes in a number of commodities. Yes, the U.S. is sort of leading the charge of reintroducing tariffs, but one can't help but think the kind of the liberalization of world trade is a page that has been turned. And as we move forward, country after country, commodity after commodity is going to be thinking about the reintroduction of border measures, protection measures, whether it be tariff, phytosanitary, or whatever the case may be. And I'm just wondering, your industry, have you given any thought to, are you worried about that with the markets you're doing business with? Are there things that you're advocating to government in this whole regard, or just what do you think about that?
Uh, um, I'm going to answer that by saying most definitely, yeah, we are concerned and we have given it a lot of thought, and but light on solutions, I'll say, and but looking at our industry in Canada, and and I'll generalize it to food production. We food tends to be produced around the world where it makes the most sense, and both from an agronomic or whatever production perspective to a trade, logistical. We grow great potatoes in PEI and New Brunswick and Maine, and we're close to the huge population in the northeastern part of the continent in the U.S. So it makes the most sense for the crop is grown well here, and logistically, it's the least distance to where it's needed. Um, so I think that will prevail, and then the other side of it, I'll say, on our processing side, is that most of the processors are, and as mentioned earlier, are have not only selling but have production facilities all over the world. They've expanded tremendously, and so much of the production capacity in the U.S. or sorry in Canada is owned by processors in the U.S. and that product goes to the U.S. So it'll be um, it. I don't see that that changing anytime soon. So that does provide some protection within our country, and a bigger challenge is though. Um, I remember 10 or 15 years ago, a couple of folks from the industry here, from the processing industry, went to China, and they just to see, kind of check things out there, and came back and said, well, it'll be 10 or 15 years before they're a significant factor. And some of us were talking here just recently. Said, you know what? It's about 15, 10 to 15. It's 15 years now since then. And guess what? Up until the last year, most of the processing capacity in North America is in the Columbia Basin, and most of that product is exported. And quickly in the last year, China and India have become significant factors. They're now have got things together, and almost close to half of the world's potato production is in those two countries, and they are now processing, and they're now competitive with the large global processors in including the North American market all over the world. So that one will be. I don't know the solution today for that one, and but in our little part of the world, I think we're well positioned uh, to maintain our significant markets.
I've been around for a long time, as a lot of us on this program have been, and it starts off with new competitors in the market, and then then moves to a conversation about, are they unduly being subsidized in the market? And that was the whole reason for the World Trade Organization, to challenge some of these countries, these commodities, to be able to take them to a panel and say, you've got state support, you've got this, you've got that, and therefore, you had a legal remedy. What worries me now with the way the WTO has fallen apart, where is the legal remedy going to be for a subsidized China production of potatoes? In fact, if they're competing in a market, I don't know whether they are subsidized, but that's often been the concern about China. Its desire to support certain sectors so that it's got foreign exchange, so that it moves into markets, so it's got employment for its people. And we used to have a place to take those. I mean, in theory, we still do, but I'm not sure anybody's paying any attention to a WTO panel anymore. And that to me is a little bit of a concern long term where that ends up going.
And I think, Jack, it's given where Trump is at. He created some of the problems for the farm sector in his own country. And then he just announced, this would be 6 weeks or more ago now, I think, a $12 billion assistance to them. And, for this country, there are competitors. For this country is, if that's the world we live in, then is our governments willing to or have to step up to the plate in the same way? Agri-stability and agri-invest isn't going to cut it if that's the kind of money the Americans are putting out there to their community.
Well, and we all know that's the world we used to live in not that long ago. I mean, my job as CFA president used to go and lobby the federal government for $1 billion every year, $1 billion for farm income support. And then we thought we moved away from that with the disciplines of the WTO. And all of that is my concern, that erosion of that kind of state activity. All you need is somebody else to play hardball with them. Brazil, thank God we got a 65-cent dollar. I'm a soybean producer. I don't want to have the same price per bushel as U.S. soybeans because I know our federal government is not going to put the money on the table to kind of compensate. So those risks are still there very heavily. And I sure hope farm organizations are working aggressively with our government to help prepare what needs to be done if it does get carried away. Anyway, enough said.
Yeah, I, I look. We're in Canada's smallest province. When we do feel pretty small sometimes, not only in our own country but around the world. And yeah, again, not to be too negative, but in my time in the industry, in the potato industry, there's more. We're dealing with way more uncertainty than I've ever seen in my time, and when you're in a place like PEI, and like I said, we're in the potato sector, we're at capacity, so we have to keep getting better, and in a world where, and especially if it's not fair competition or it's unfair competition, like how do we somebody told me, like, if you're going to be a low cost producer, you have to be the lowest cost producer in the world, and we just cannot do that in with the factors how we farm here in PEI. So and if you throw in unfair other unfair, where it's pretty it's going to be it's a big hill to climb. Yeah.
Well, and the $12 billion, Wayne, that's almost 100% of the U.S.'s annual WTO entitlement, not to speak of all the other money that they've thrown into agriculture before and will continue after. And comparative advantage, Jack, you will remember when the American Farm Bureau said without blushing that their high subsidies were their comparative advantage. And you're right, they don't care. The WTO, as far as I'm concerned, we can kiss it goodbye until at least this administration, the U.S. is gone, and then they may have gotten used to protectionism, and it's going to be really tough to claw that back. Let's touch a little more on regulatory issues, Greg, before we're done. Regulatory issues, environmental issues, pesticide use, fish kills, and people getting headaches when you guys spray your potatoes. Where is that at? It used to be really bad. Where is that at today?
It doesn't exist. I wish I could say it doesn't exist, but it's look. Again, I've been here 17 years in this role. When I first came here, it was a big issue on PEI, and but fortunately, I can say it is not today. And I really mean that it is not. And so what has changed is, yeah, we even back when we did have an issue with fish kills, and it was farmers were using products that were registered by Health Canada, and they're using them the way they were supposed to. But the but I'll say is, but we learned that under conditions like on PEI and our soil types, our weather conditions, that some of those products had risks. There's a particular fungicide, I'll say, that it was known to, it bound really well to plants and offered good protection, but it also bound well to soil. So if we had erosion that went in our streams, then it posed a hazard to streams. The long and short, that product's hardly used. It's had changes to the label that ensure that that doesn't happen, and when it can be used, and many of those products aren't even available today that we used back then. Broad spectrum uh, uh, pesticides and that sort of thing. So today we have through regulation, and I'm going to say mostly because of evolving good practices from our farmers, we don't have the issues. We have mandatory buffer zones around our streams. We have a huge focus on, I mentioned earlier, on soil health. So cover crops, rotation crops that are improving our, we went through decades of declining organic matter. We've stopped that, and now we're increasing organic matter. Just a whole range of change in practices that and products that are used, and integrated pest management, that more specific products when we do use them, that those that problem in particular that you mentioned haven't occurred for, and Wayne helped me out here, I'm going to say several years now. So
Yeah,
yeah, yeah,
it's quite a while. It's probably 10 years or so before since we've had a
yep.
big problem.
Yeah, so that's on the pesticide. But on you asked on regulatory, we do have, and probably if you polled our farmers, they'd probably say, next to the big challenges of trade and weather and costs and labor, right up there would be regulatory challenges. Just ever increasing. And I think it's like a lot of things we talked about today. There's even on PEI, used to be on PEI, if you lived in Charlottetown here, you'd have a relative in the countryside that had a farm. And that's not even the case here in PEI anymore. So same as everywhere else, small portion of the population that are farming and involved in agriculture, and rules and regulations, a lot of them, in some cases old ones and new ones, that are being set by people that don't have a lot of common sense when it comes to the realities of farming or what's needed, and CFIA is a great example of that. So they're a barrier to, they're an obstacle. They're creating an additional challenge and uncertainty, rather than being a partner look, as long as we eat or as long as we're around, we need livestock, and we need crops and food, and we all know we're going to have plant and animal health issues, and but we have to manage those, but we also have to have farmers that can maintain and grow the business, and keep supplying us with food. And that's the regulations, particularly at CFIA and PMRA, are a hindrance as opposed to a help to that.
Well,
Yeah.
that's totally new to us, isn't it, Jack and Wayne? I said that's news to us, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh
CFIA and
dear. Yeah.
the
But
PMRA being
I
totally
think it's getting
mystified
worse,
by
Bob. Yeah.
what's that?
I think
it
it's
is.
getting worse, and because of that, the demographics of who's involved in agriculture and who isn't. It used to be in CFI, and I'm telling you guys stuff it used to be that there's a lot of good people in that organization today, and there was in the past, but the people in the past came from farms. They had an appreciation for a farm and business as well as taking care of our problems. Today, unless that's mandated by the leadership and it goes right through the organization and their KPIs, the good people they have today will do the same thing, but they're strictly in a plant health zero risk approach, and they've forgotten and they don't have it in their mandate the business side of things, and that's what we're missing.
Jack.
Just briefly, I know you want to wrap, but that used to be the full-time job of the Canadian Federation of Agriculture president. Mm-hmm. Both Bob and myself was in meeting the health minister over PMRA, meeting the minister over the CFA, talking about changes to regulation. And I mean, that's always been a serious issue. But we never were successful when we just said we should get rid of them all. And I'm not saying you're advocating that, but there are some individuals in the industry that think any regulation is bad. And I think the best role a farm organization can do is ask government and the consumer, what problem are we trying to solve? And let's get into the room and put together a plan that's both cost effective and practical for a farmer to run their farm business and meets the objective of being more friendly to the environment and being more sensitive to our pesticide and insecticide use. And I think if we really push that aggressively, we're going to be the consumer friend and will be seen as that. We've had some jurisdictions like in Europe when the consumer and the farm organizations don't even talk to each other anymore. They're not seen as friends of each other. And it's really, really hurt the farmer's reputation, I think, in the consumer's eye. So, I'm not saying we're not doing it, but I really think we can never underestimate the power of our farmers grouping together and taking a solution to the government when we say we need a change versus just saying we need a change and CFIA isn't doing the job. And Greg, don't get me wrong, you didn't say that, but I hear this all the time in the farm community, this lack of kind of desire to go shoulder to shoulder to find the solution. Instead, each other's viewing the other side as a bit of an enemy and a problem versus we got to convince them to do it in a more effective, cost-effective way.
No, you're both absolutely right. I mean, look, they're both completely mystified by working closely with stakeholders. They don't get it. And it's not about farmers wanting to compromise health or environmental safety or environmental sustainability. What they want is they want some decent partners to work with together and figure things out, right? I recall well, Jack, when you said to the then Director General of the PMRA, we have two options here. You either cooperate or I will do everything I can to get you fired.
Yeah.
And she decided to cooperate.
That does sound like Jack.
Well,
All right, gentlemen. That's been a great dialogue. Greg, thank you so much for being a guest on the show. Thanks, Jack and Wayne. And remember, if you've eaten today or will be eating today, thank a farmer.
Take care.
All right.